So onward we go with consumer purchasing strategies and legal protection, I should say. So in this chapter, we're going to focus on identifying the strategies for effective consumer buying. Very straightforward. And again, this is where we plan our expenditures as much as we can, trying to think ahead, thinking about all the costs, all the opportunity costs, once again, that are associated with making this purchase decision, making this decision to go out and buy on credit, cash, etc. So we're implementing a process for making those consumer purchases and determining the steps to take to resolve consumer problems. And they do come up. I have many stories that I could share with you, but it's something that all of us go through. There are some issues that associate with the purchase of whatever comes up, whatever we buy. And finally, evaluate the legal alternatives available to consumers to address those problems if they get to that point where you have disputes with the merchant, etc. Right? So first, again, identify the strategies for effective consumer buying. There are financial implications that are associated with all consumer decisions. You, the consumer, whenever you're buying something, there are going to be ramifications, implications, and it's what I call buyer's remorse. No matter what we purchase, there's always some degree of buyer's remorse, meaning that you buy something and afterward you really start to consider whether or not that was a wise decision. It's probably best to get as much of that out of the way as you can up front, right? So anyway, onward. Daily buying decisions involve trade-offs. We've already talked about opportunity costs, and the trade-offs are the actual measurement, if you will, between the decision to buy something and the decision not to, or the decision to buy one thing over the decision to buy something else. And again, the trade-offs between current spending and saving for the future is what we're talking about in this instance. Consume now or defer consumption. Spend now or save for the future. There are economic, social, and personal factors that influence all of our spending, saving, and investing choices. Always have been, always will be. So commonly overlooked trade-offs, back to the trade-off issue. So this is the actual measuring that opportunity cost, if you will, in solid terms and in real terms, if you will. Again, commonly overlooked trade-offs when buying include paying a higher price over time by using credit to buy items you need now. And the critical part to that is need, is determining your need, if you actually need this item now or simply would like to have this item now. Because remember, needs and wants are two different things. We want more, we want everything. How much do we really need? This is when we have to make these critical decisions, if you will. Buying unknown, possibly poor quality brands that are less expensive. So again, the trade-off between buying something that cost $50 versus some substitute that we see at the time as being reasonable, a reasonable substitute for that item for $50. Instead, we purchase it for $25. So it's half the price. We have to consider, why is it that it's half the price? Is it because it's a lesser known brand, or is it perhaps because of quality? These are all things that we have to consider. And we've all been there. We've all made decisions where we thought we were getting a good deal, and it turned out to be that we ended up having to spend twice as much or more after the fact. So ordering online, which always saves time and money, especially nowadays, right? May make it difficult to return, replace, or repair purchases. And this goes back to buying things using your credit card online, so that you have more recourse, or more ready recourse in terms of returning a defective item or returning an item regardless, whether we're sending it back through the mail to Amazon, or if we buy something from a Meijer or some other department store online, we can return it to the store. All these things are ordering online is easy. However, returning something that you order online is not always quite so easy. Taking time and effort to comparison shop to save money and obtain better after-sale service. Again, these are all things that we can do. There's a term called window shopping, and it's taken an interesting turn, but let me just kind of give you a background on this. Window shopping occurred just as the name implies. People would go to such places, so we'll stick with Best Buy. Go to Best Buy and they find a computer that they want to purchase. And so they went to Best Buy, found that computer, and then they went online to Amazon or some other online resource and found that it was less expensive. So they would go to Amazon and purchase that same computer. So what happened was that Best Buy nearly went out of business. And the way that Best Buy fought back was by almost doing a reverse type of a window shopping routine, where a customer would again go to Best Buy, find that item that they wanted, and then they would go online, and especially today, we can get on our smartphones and find something, and we can do some comparison shopping, and we find something that's less expensive at, through Amazon or some other online source. We find it at a lower price. We could show that price to the retailer, in this case Best Buy, and Best Buy would honor that lower price. And as straightforward, as simple as that, and that saved Best Buy from going out of business. And anyways, these are just things that are to kind of keep in mind. So again, that's the comparison shopping with the trade-offs. Buying influences, there are economic factors always at play. Such things as inflation, interest rate, tax rates, government regulation, product safety. You want to buy a new car and interest rates have gone up from, you want to buy a new car and interest rates have gone up from, we'll say, 3% for a 4-year loan, 48 months, to 6%. It's going to impact your decision to purchase something, correct? Absolutely. Taxes that are associated with the purchase, inflation in general, things are always going to affect our buying, our purchasing. Social factors, lifestyles, interests, hobbies, peer group, keeping up with the Joneses, culture, advertising that's always playing on us, are always trying to find our weakness out there, if you will. Other media sources where someone sees something and they like it, or they recently I saw get this, snowshoes. How about that? I was looking at snowshoes and just curious, and I was just absolutely amazed to find how many places have snowshoes that are available online, and the extremes they go to try to get you to purchase snowshoes from them. I didn't buy them, but it was just interesting to look at something as mundane as something like that, if you will. Personal factors, gender, age, occupation, income, education, marital status, family status, all these things come into play when you want to purchase something, or if they all impact what the buying decision, buying influences, all this stuff comes into play, or any combination thereof. Your age, your gender, occupation that you're in, the amount of education that you have, all these things. And there's always somebody, if you're married, to say no, hopefully, to your impulse buying decision that you want to go forward with, someone to make you think about things a bit. Okay, wise purchasing strategies, comparison shopping again, alternative stores, brands and prices, avoid impulse buying. Even though there's the deal seems too good to be true and you can't pass it up, and so on and so forth, take a step back and do some comparison shopping, especially if this is something that is an unplanned purchase that is going to put you in a more precarious financial position. Timing purchases, be aware of the price varies at the time of the year. Buying cars at the end of the month, at the end of the year type of where they're the salespeople are more keen to try to reach their objectives, and prices are typically, you can negotiate prices a bit more. The purchase location, choice of retailer depends on location, price, product selection, services available. And that can go from being in a high-end retail establishment and buying something that you could actually purchase at another lower cost, if you will, like a Meijer, versus going to a Nordstrom to buy something. And perhaps the same thing, perhaps something very similar. Typically the price would be lower at like a Meijer, for example, just using that as an example, but hopefully you get the idea. Cooperatives are nonprofit organizations where members save money. These are not quite as, I don't know if they're quite popular as they were in the past, but in the past they were very popular, where you would go to a food co-op and make your food purchases through this co-op, where there would be groups, the co-op itself would buy, rather than a gallon of milk for retail, they would buy 500 gallons and individual gallons, which would lower the cost, of course. At any rate, brand comparison, shopping store brand, again, low cost alternative versus the national brand. Oftentimes this is something that most people I'm guessing are familiar with it, but oftentimes the store brand item is actually being made by the same the higher end brand. By that, they're being produced, except they don't have their label on it, and so that's the reason the prices are a bit lower. Oftentimes, it all depends, but these are things that if you dig into them a little bit, and if you take a chance on store brands and find that they're reasonable substitutes, oh well. These are things that we learn as we go along, right? Label information label can be helpful, or just advertising. Again, there are federal laws that are required on food labels where indicates such things as expiration dates, good until dates, the nutritional value, carbohydrate count, calories, so on and so forth. And then open dating was what I just described, the freshness or shelf life of perishable products. So that tells you the expiration date for what you're purchasing. Price comparison, unit pricing is very, very helpful. This is something that's been pretty much standardized, meaning that you can get the price per ounce, price per pound, price per unit, and so you can compare similar products that are out there. How much it costs per gallon for, again, I'll use Meijer, it doesn't matter, Kroger, Meijer, whatever. Kroger brand milk versus Borden milk, for example. There's a unit price, but not just, typically it's easy to see if it's a gallon, but oftentimes you would break it down by ounce, but you get the idea. Coupons always help save money on groceries, and some people are coupon clippers, some are not. Rebates or partial refund of price of products when you're purchasing. A lot of times automotive, oil, and so on and so forth, there are rebates that are offered, and these are all part of the calculation from when you're purchasing something. When is that rebate? Is it an instant rebate that you get a knockoff price immediately, or do you have to mail it in? All these other things. Convenience and ready-to-use products mean higher prices. That's always the case, or nearly always the case. Larger packages are usually the best buy. Sale prices may not always mean saving money. Does it just say sale because they want to sell something, or is there truly a price that's a discounted price, if you will? So example of the unit pricing. 64-ounce product cost $8.32, which would be calculated in this manner. And this is all done for you. Unit price of $8.32 for that 64-ounce product divided by the 64 ounces gives you 13 cents, or 13 cents per ounce per whatever that product is, if you will. Why is online buying activities? I like these things. It's always you start back over again and do this over and over and over again. And we all do this as a matter of course. Conducting your online service, online research rather, compare brands. There are a lot of different things out there. One of the things is called Honey, and it finds competitive, does like a competitive shopping for you, price shopping for you. There are different apps that are out there that are available for this. So compare brands and features and going through all the parameters that you want. So you're comparing the product itself, trying to figure out the product. Next, you're looking at retailers and you find which makes more sense, whether you're buying it online or if you're going to be buying it in person at a at a store, if you will, and making that purchase. And lastly, and of course, you always have, whenever you're making a purchase, especially when you're talking again online, is you want to make sure that you're whatever you're using, whether you're buying it, through your debit card, through a credit card, through services like Venmo or what are some of the other ones that are out there, PayPal, etc. All these different services that are out there to make these purchases. It's most important to make sure that you have I think it's HTTPS that you want to look for. At any rate, you're probably more familiar with these things than I am. I buy things online, but it's not probably quite as frequent perhaps as you do. Lastly, plan for future purchases. So you keep an idea of how much you actually paid for a product. Keep it, in your memory banks, if you will, or write it down. And especially if it's something that you're going to be purchasing over and over again. Classic example, and this is not online, but gasoline. Most people pay attention to how much it costs per gallon. Some people don't, and they're probably better off for it in some ways, but keeping an eye on prices, this is really what it is. Being aware of kind of doing an after action report on your purchases so that you can plan for the next time you go around, starting back up at the top again, right? So warranties. Warranty is a guarantee, a written guarantee from manufacturer, distributor, and it specifies. It's everything is specified within the framework of that warranty. What's covered, how long, so on and so forth. So there are two types basically of warranties: full or limited. Express warranty is usually written. And there's an implied warranty of title, which indicates the seller has the right to sell the product, meaning that once you purchase it, you have ownership of that. Ownership is 9/10 of the law as an expression. Implied warranty of merchantability guarantees the product is fit for its ordinary use. Used car warranties, disclosure, it has to be indicated how long, 60, 90 days, or if it's sold as is. They've got that in quotes, if you will. As is has to be noted, or it's I guess it's the if there's nothing that's stated, then it's as is. New car warranties include such things as basic parts, powertrain, corrosion coverage for a specified period of time. Usually it's about 3 years. And the add-on to this is a service contract, is also known as an extended warranty. They're not warranties, they are warranties in terms of they have a certain coverage, but they're very, very specific in what is covered and what is not covered. If there is a deductible, if there's an out-of-pocket that's associated with that. And so you have to really be careful with service contracts. Okay, so we're buying vehicles. We'll start with that. Implement a process for making consumer purchases, pre-shopping activities, all the things that we'd identified before that we talked about. Doing all of it's called due diligence, looking before you buy, make sure that you're familiar with what it is that you're buying, which is the case with anything, but especially with larger dollar ticket items. they're called durable goods. They're things that are relatively long lasting, hopefully. So phase one is the pre-shopping activities, problem identification, do as much research, of course, as you can, information gathering, personal contacts, business organizations, government agencies, other online sources. Do as much, again, upfront as you can. Most of this stuff can be done where? Online, right? Ask yourself, can I delay the purchase or do without item? This is especially the case when you're looking at buying a new vehicle, right? It's a large expense, and typically it's going to take you 3, 4, 5, 6 years to pay this off. So you really want to consider. Speaking of considering, do you want to pay cash or do you want to buy on credit? Typically, we're going to opt for credit, but if cash is an option, to consider it. Consider it and consider you have to go through the opportunity cost of associated with it, because once you pay for something, whether with cash or credit, you are on the hook for that item, right? Which brand should I consider? What fits your price range, your needs, so on and so forth? How do price, quality, and service differ among stores? Is it possible to rent the item instead of buying? We were speaking of cars before, but it could be anything. Always doing comparison shopping. And in this case, again, we're talking about vehicle, selecting the vehicle options. What is it that you need? And what is it that you'd like to have? If this is needs and wants, you start to separate the two. First, address your needs. You need a car that's going to be serviceable for 3 or 4 years or whatever. You've got a family of 4, so you're going to need at least a sedan. A 6-passenger or 5-passenger vehicle, etc. So you've got 4 kids, and so that's a 6-passenger with yourself and your spouse. Anyway, checking out used cars. This is the checklist, if you will, and these are things that all of us, either we do or we get somebody to do at our behest, bring it to a mechanic, etc. So outside the vehicle or somebody else with you to kind of go through this checklist again with you. Looking for major dents and signs of accidents, inspecting the trunk and spare tire, make sure that there is a spare tire, make sure that the spare tire has air, and if it doesn't have air, then these are all things to keep note of. Check the tire tread wear, observe smoothness of springs and shocks when pushing down on cars. So you push down on the car, and if it comes right back up, hopefully that's a sign that the suspension is working properly. That your shock absorbers, your springs, your suspension is operating properly. Again, it has to come back up rather quickly. Check operation of doors and windows, and look for leaking fluids under the vehicle. If the car has been sitting for a long time, that's usually a signal, or that's you can, but if nothing else, move the car to another spot and just take a peek and see if you can crawl underneath or look under the side to see if there are any oil leaks, etc. You would ask the seller, of course, these questions as well, but follow through on your own. Inside the car, look for wear on pedals and steering column. To check for operation of dash lights, accessories, check an instrument panel, operation of gauges, start engine, and check operation of power accessories such as radios, wiper, heater. All these things have to, because there's nothing worse than buying a car. I've done it, and things aren't working properly. Sometimes they just break down, and it's not anyone's fault per se, but sometimes there are times when I remember buying a car many years ago where the rear window defogger didn't work. I bought the car in the summertime, never knew it until when? Winter. And then that was a real pain. Anyway, that's just an example. Engine check for leaks of fluids and overheating. Check oil level for signs of leaks. Check radiator cap, radiator for cracks and repairs, and for oil and coolant. That's getting pretty deep into it. And that could be done by taking that again to a mechanic. They could take a look at that for you, check batteries and battery and cables, expect a smooth, clean start. If it doesn't, if it whines for a while, then you have to think about whether or not this is the vehicle for you. Road test the vehicle, let the vehicle warm up, test drive on the road, in which you're familiar, listen for smoothness of acceleration. All these things that, when it comes down to it, remember now, there's a lot of unknown, and you want to reduce those unknowns as to the extent that you possibly can, is really what it comes down to. So these are other alternatives to purchasing. For actually purchasing a vehicle. So leasing a car. Leasing is a contract. It's a rental is what you're doing. It's a contract to use an automobile for a monthly payment. Advantage is lower payments than buying because you don't have an equity stake in the vehicle itself. You're just renting it. Security deposit smaller than the down payment for buying typically. And ideally you would like to actually lease the vehicle with nothing down, with zero down, but that's where the negotiating part comes into play. Lease agreements provides business records, usually obtained more expensive. You're usually able to obtain a more expensive vehicle. And again, back with the lease agreement, providing business records means that if you have a business and with mileage and writing things off, such as vehicles that you can submit expense reports, then leasing is probably the way to go. Anyway, drawbacks: no ownership interest, meaning that you don't own the vehicle. Possible charge if you go over on the miles, certainly charged for going over miles. Requirements similar again to qualifying for credit, meaning that whoever you're going to be leasing the vehicle through, they're going to be looking at all of your financial records. That's the way it is. Know the capitalized cost of the lease, the money factor, the monthly payment, the number of payments, and the residual value. All of these things, when we talk about the capitalized cost, the money factor, monthly payment, number of payments, and the residual value, all of these are part and parcel of leasing. Okay. So determining that purchase price. Price negotiation for new and used cars, knowing necessary information about the product, deal with the person of authority to give you a lower price or additional features. What happens typically when you go to a dealership is that you have a salesperson, and then the salesperson, when it comes down to actual negotiation of prices, etc., they have to talk to their manager, is the expression. And you go as quickly as you possibly can to that manager or the decision maker when it comes to the actual pricing, and those are the folks that you would actually be doing the negotiating with. So used cars, there are a lot of different, Kelley Blue Book, kbb.com, I think it is, Edmunds. You can look at used car prices and to see what they are for. I think they have 3 ratings: excellent, average, and then fair or poor. It might be 3 or 4, but you can see the quality of the vehicle out there in general, if you will, and you get a decent price on what the consumer prices, the retail prices are. New cars, you can have set dealer prices or car buying services, and what that means, the set dealer price, is that you know what the price is going in, and oftentimes there's wiggle room, if you will, on both sides negotiating. But this is when you walk in, you see what the sticker price is, the manufacturer suggested retail price, the MSRP, and oftentimes they have what's called a no-dicker sticker. In other words, you don't argue about the price, but that is something, again, that it's either spelled out or you want to be looking for these, if you will. So comparing finance alternatives, a variety of lenders. Some lenders may pre-approve you for a certain loan amount. Avoid being upside down or having a negative equity in your car. Look for rebates or low interest financing. Consider the APR, that true cost of credit. So what this kind of boils down to is that when when they say if you're buying a car, new car, used car, and you're going to be buying it on credit, it's really, really important to get a pre-approval from a financial institution. So what I typically do is I contact my credit union, for example, if I'm going to buy a new vehicle, and I make sure I have my pre-approval at the ready, how much they're going to be charging for what the interest rate I can get through my credit union. And they're usually pretty good, fairly competitive rates. And if you have that in hand, that is a great negotiating tool for any dealership that you go to, for example, because of course that if they want to do the deal through their dealership, through their credit agency, then they have to have a lower price than what you're getting from your credit union, for example. Anyway, looking for rebates and low interest financing, it's always out there. Usually it's one or the other. You either get the rebate or you get the low interest financing, but that's another point of negotiation. Always, always, always find out what the APR is, and they do have to divulge that. So example, upside down. I didn't want to get into that, but I guess we'll get there. So a $26,000 vehicle is purchased with an initial loan of $18,000, meaning you put down $8,000. After a period of time, the vehicle may be worth $12,000, while you still owe $14,000 on that vehicle. To avoid this situation, make a large down payment, have a short-term loan, less than 5 years, and pay off the loan faster than the decline in the value of the vehicle. So these are all things to consider. If you're going to buy a new car and if you're going to stick with it for 5 or 6 years, you don't worry about it, because you're going to end up, the vehicle is going to drop in value, and drops more quickly early on, and then later on in the life of the vehicle, it starts to flatten out, if you will. So keep that in mind. Keep the vehicle for 5 years, or if you're going to be keeping it for less than 5 years, then pay it off as early as you can, and that way you'll save on the residual value of the vehicle. There are a lot of different ways of playing this, but the takeaway is that the vehicle is going to lose value the older it gets, obviously. So post-purchase activities, lemon laws. Lemon laws. Basically, lemon law is that if the vehicle turns into a terrible, terrible purchase. So automobile operation costs, fixed ownership cost, depreciation is the largest. And all these, there are different measurements, the total cost of operating a vehicle. There are a lot of different metrics that are out there available. Variable operating cost. So the fixed ownership cost includes the cost of your monthly payment, and the depreciation is that part that goes into this as well. Depreciation means how much of the vehicle you're actually using up, or how much the vehicle loses in value, if you will. Again, as soon as you drive off the lot, people say the rule of thumb is it loses 20% of its value from the purchase price, or the value, period. Variable operating costs would include such things as gasoline, consumables, meaning your oil, brakes, so on and so forth, and other more high-end cost, if you will, as the older the vehicle gets, hopefully. Motor vehicle maintenance, you have to regularly take care of these the major repairs, of course. Automobile servicing sources, car dealers, auto repair shops, mass merchandise retailers, Walmart, specialty shops. Keep your records. That's the key. I'm sure we'll be talking about this as we go forward, but keep records of oil changes and so on and so forth. You can do a lot of that online through different services for free, but also you want to make sure you keep records if you do decide, or when you do decide to sell your vehicle, that you were taking care of it. Research-based approach to purchasing a vehicle, pre-shopping, all these things that we talked about before. Evaluating alternatives, part 2, selecting the vehicle options that you want, comparing leasing versus buying, buying a used car versus, again, buying a new car, determining that purchase price through negotiation, and comparing, going through all of the different financing alternatives, including the rebates, securing your credit through getting a pre-approval so that you can negotiate that at the dealership. If you want to, if you have a set price going in so far as your interest rate is concerned and you have that locked in, if you can negotiate a lower price, then you go with that, the interest, I mean. Lastly is the post-purchase activities, taking care of the vehicle, maintenance, so on and so forth. And so that also helps you keep track of your expenses, but you also helps you to consider your next purchase. So as soon as you purchase a vehicle, you're considering your next purchase, saving, etc. And the more history that you have with the vehicle, the more ideas, or the better idea of what it is that you want in your next vehicle. Resolving consumer complaints, and now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of this part of it, and the return to place purchase, emailing the company to obtain its consumer hotline by calling. There's an 800 number here. Better Business Bureau, mediation through a third party, arbitration, federal and state government agencies. Keep this in mind when you have a vehicle, when you purchase, and we're talking about vehicles, you have what's called the right of rescission. So within the first 72 hours, 3 days, for example, if you don't like the vehicle, you have the right to return it and to get your money back, if you will. These are just things kind of to keep in mind. Resolving consumer complaints, initial communication, communicating with the company itself, consumer advocacy, agency assistance, and lastly, legal consideration. Again, we're going through the list of the first thing, the initial communication, to try to figure out things with the consumer, with the merchant, with the car dealership, for example, and trying to get the problem resolved as early as you can. And then you're going to the next steps until you get to the actual legal action part where you're talking to an attorney. So lastly, now, legal options for consumers, evaluating legal alternatives available to consumers, small claims court, class action suits, going through lawyers, other legal alternatives. When they say class action suits, that's when there's significant problems with the vehicle that other people are also experiencing, etc. Anyways, prepaid legal services, you oftentimes if you're working for a company, they do offer some, oftentimes you can get in your benefits packages, another thing that we'll be getting into later, prepaid legal services, some personal consumer protection that's always out there, it's available. Do business with reputable companies. Always caution, and read your contracts. I've signed things before where afterward I had no idea what I was signing. Point being that you have to, then you're rolling the dice. You're trusting someone else. So make sure that you read through these documents. Take your time. Compare again buying on credit versus paying for cash, and avoid rushing to get a deal, because again, I hate to say it, but it's something that we all need to be cognizant, be aware of, that there are going to be other opportunities down the road. Always just take your time.